Good afternoon, boys and girls, and welcome to the Constitution Day Assembly. Constitution Day is an American federal observance that recognizes the adoption of the United States Constitution and those who have become U.S. citizens. It is traditionally observed on September 17th, the day in 1787, when delegates to the Constitutional Convention signed our framing document in Philadelphia. The first Constitution Day was inspired by Arthur Pine, the head of the publicity public relations firm in New York City. At the New York World's Fair, the writers of a new song called I Am an American brought their manuscript to the attention of Arthur Pine, who handled publicity and arranged for I Am an American Day at the World's Fair. The venture proved so successful that a newspaper chain promoted I Am an American Day on a nationwide basis, and President Roosevelt declared it as an official day. Hence, Constitution Day as we know it was formed. And now we're going to have a presentation of the preamble of the American Constitution.
We, the people of the United States,
in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice,
ensure domestic tranquility,
provide for the common defense,
promote the general welfare,
secure blessings of liberty,
for ourselves and our posterity.
to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
And now, will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
On a very special location. We're in the most historic square mile in the entire country. So you think about it, everybody thinks Boston's really old and Colonial Williamsburg is really old, but it all happened here. This is the important spot. All these founding documents, the Declaration, the Constitution, it all started here in Philadelphia. On this mile, you have Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, and the National Constitution Center right behind me. Now, our job here at the Constitution Center is to disseminate information to the public about the Constitution in a nonpartisan way. Now, what that means is we want to make sure that we're reading the Constitution, seeing what it says, and that everybody's voice and opinion is shared and heard in a way that everybody feels like they're a part of the conversation. And what we really do is we tell the story of we the people. That means me, that means you, that means people you know like Martin Luther King, but it's other people that you may not even heard of. It's really about how we, as Americans in this country, have formed our Constitution and really established it. So let's take a closer look inside today and have some fun.
Welcome everyone and happy Constitution Day. I'm Aggie Alves from Discovery Education and we are live from the National Constitution Center. You'll be hearing more from Curry Saunders from inside the museum over the next 30 minutes. And as with all of our virtual field trips, please send us your photos on Twitter @DiscoveryEd with the hashtag DEConstitutionDay 2015. We are so pleased to have Judge Marjorie Rendell with us today. She's a federal appellate judge with the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Welcome, Judge Rendell.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
We have many questions that students have submitted ahead of time from all across the country, and one question that kept coming up was, what exactly does a federal appellate judge do?
Well, as the name connotes, we are in court of appeals, and that means that if in the trial court you are unsuccessful, let's say you're a defendant and you're convicted of crime and you believe something went wrong in the trial, you have the right of appeal. So you can appeal to our court, and the lawyers file briefs, they file written papers saying what they believe went wrong in the trial court. The other side will say what they believe went right in the trial court to try to get it affirmed. And we do a lot of reading. We read the briefs, we may hear argument. That means the lawyers will come before a 3-judge panel. And this happens all across the country. This is just, I'm in one court of appeals. We take appeals from the trial courts in Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and the Virgin Islands. And everyone who is dissatisfied with the result in the trial court has the ability to come and we hear their case and decide whether the district court was correct or whether the case will be reversed and sent back.
So another question that kept coming up was about your role in the Constitution. How often do you refer to the Constitution? How big of a part does the Constitution play in your day-to-day work?
Well, the Constitution plays a big role in our day-to-day work. So many cases are brought based upon constitutional rights, whether it's under the First Amendment, free speech, free press, freedom of religion, Fourth Amendment, unreasonable searches and seizures. So many of our criminal cases have Fourth Amendment issues embedded in them. Someone says that evidence should be suppressed because the search was unreasonable. So the Constitution plays a huge role in everything. Not everything I do, and there are cases that are not based upon the Constitution. Of course, they can be based upon federal statutes, or even state law can come into play in diversity cases. But the Constitution rears its head quite a lot in what I do, and of course I'm a member of the branch of government, founded in Article 3 of the Constitution, so I'm right at home in the Constitution.
So we have a question from Keegan, and Keegan is from Pelham Memorial Middle School in New Hampshire. And this is another question that we kept getting a lot from students. What inspired you to be a judge?
Well, dealing in the legal system, I was a practicing lawyer for 20 years, and I appeared before judges all the time. There's something about being a federal judge. It's just the best job a lawyer can aspire to. And I was fortunate that I got to know President Clinton when he was running for president, and that really didn't hurt in terms of my becoming nominated for this job. So I was nominated by the president, of course confirmed by the Senate, and it's an honor. It's a true honor, and ask any federal judge, they basically pinch themselves that they have this privilege to do this wonderful work.
Well, students are interested in sort of the steps that you take to become a judge, and I've got 2 questions that are related, so I'll give them both to you at the same time. So Trace from Hudson Middle School in Hudson, Texas, and Dylan from Holly Pond High School in Pullman, Alabama, want to know what kind of college degree is needed to become a judge, and what are the typical steps involved in becoming a judge? And I realize that it may be different for each individual, but tell us a little bit about your career path.
Well, the college degree is interesting, and I love to quiz kids when I speak to them and have them guess what my college degree was, and they never can, because I was a French major. But I use that to tell kids you don't need to have a specific major in college. I didn't decide until I left college that I was going to go to law school. I was a French major. I was qualified to teach French, but I decided I wanted a different career path. If I would recommend a major, English would be wonderful because writing is a big part of what we do. But the second part of the steps that you take.
What are the steps involved in becoming a federal judge?
Actually, working hard in my law firm, having done well in law school. I said I know President Clinton, but I had to go through a big screening process that the senators in our state held. There were 80 applicants who were screened by the senators for my position. Luckily, I did very well in that screening process, so Clinton didn't have to, cross his fingers and his toes to nominate me and hope that I would do a good job. But the steps really are just to do a good job in your work. It doesn't hurt to get to know some of the people of influence in your community who might want to recommend you. And because the president and the Senate, they don't really know you. But if you can get someone in your community who will vouch for you and say, this person is a hard worker, she will be fair, she will be industrious, she will be nice, to those who appear before her, and those kinds of people who will help you and recommend you are very important.
Well, we'll learn more about your path. Right now, we're going to come back to more of our students' questions a little bit later. But let's finish going on our tour with Curry and check out more exhibits.
Here at the National Constitution Center, lots of things happen. We think of them as 3 different areas. We want people to come to the museum and visit it for all the great interactive pieces. We want people to learn with our civic education tools both in the building and online. And we're America's Town Hall. We are a place for Americans to come to and discuss and talk about the Constitution. But really, the heart of this institution is this exhibit we're in right now. It gives you a chance to step through time and be able to touch things, try on different roles, and have a lot of fun with the Constitution. You'll find a timeline, and it starts in 1765, and it goes all the way through the exhibit to modern day. On the lower area, you'll have things from that time period. The upper area of the glass actually has the words of the Constitution, and there was a reason they picked glass for this. They wanted to show that the actions of the people below were reflected in the words of the Constitution above, and vice versa. The 13th Amendment is a really big amendment, because when it was written, it ended slavery in our country, which we had been fighting a civil war over. In 2015 marks the 150th anniversary of the 13th Amendment, which is a big deal. But when it was written, it was a huge deal. It was so important that Abraham Lincoln put his name to it. This was not normal, and afterwards, no other president did it again. The original 13th Amendment went to the National Archives, where they made ceremonial copies, and Abraham Lincoln was so excited about this that he wrote his name on over a dozen copies, because it was such a celebration for our country, finally ending slavery. The exhibit behind me focuses on the Civil Rights era of the 1960s, and this is a perfect example of when Americans used the First Amendment to tell the world and to tell our country that we were not upholding the ideals of the Declaration, of the Constitution, and of the Bill of Rights to really make a more perfect union. The picture behind me is of a group of women that were picketing the White House. This was the first picket ever of the White House, and it started on January 10, 1917. What they were fighting for was the right to vote. And every single day, for 6 months, they were using their First Amendment freedom to tell the president and to tell the world that it wasn't fair that women didn't have the right to vote. So this is America's national trade. It has 100 different people that have affected the Constitution. The idea behind this, though, is not people that you normally know. A lot of the people you may never heard of. So some of them are the unsung heroes of American history, but a few of them are people that you may not even like. And you think, what do they have to do with the Constitution? And the whole entire idea is that you get up, you touch one, and you find out a little bit more. And a lot of times in American history, you don't get to hear the stories of the bad guys or the people that aren't in the history books. And the treaty gives us a chance to celebrate all the people in America that have made a difference and made an impact on the Constitution. This is Election Central, and this is your chance to get to try to vote. You may not be 18 yet, and here it's okay, because this is practice area. You get to go in and you get to vote for your favorite president of all time in American history. But there's a trick to this section. You actually don't know who you're voting for. You have to read quotes from the presidents from the past and what they said about different issues that matter to you. And then through those quotes, choose a candidate that lines up with you the best. Did you know that when the presidents take the oath of office, they actually swear to uphold and defend the Constitution? This is a big deal. When you're standing here in the exhibit, you get to practice that as well. You get to stand with the seal right in front of you, with some major presidents behind you, and you get imposed into this moment, and you get to swear in as well. So a perk of working here is you actually get to stand on top of the exhibits. The exhibit that I'm standing on top of is called Balance of Powers. It has 3 different branches of government. This branch over here is actually Article 1 of the Constitution. It's the legislative branch, and this is the building that houses Congress in Washington, D.C. Right here is the 2nd article of the Constitution, and it sets up the executive branch. This is the White House. Now, behind me is Article 3 of the Constitution that sets up the judicial branch or the Supreme Court. They're set up this way so you can really understand the balance of powers that happens between the first 3 articles of the Constitution. And that's the idea of standing here. You balance between the way our government is set up to make sure the good of the Constitution is really shining through. So Did you ever feel like you were a really good judge of character? Well, there's a great spot here at the museum that you can really test your skills. Maybe not at judging character, but by judging and interpreting if a law is constitutional. This is a replica of the Supreme Court bench, and you get a chance to come here, try on a robe, and then try a case, and be one of the 9 Supreme Court justices to see if that case is a constitutional case or an unconstitutional law. And your judging can really change the way our country works. So come on and give it a try over here. You're hearing the stories about all these Americans. We want you to add your story too. And that's the coolest part of the Constitution. It can be amended. It can be added to. So this question right here is a big one. If you wanted to add a 28th Amendment, what would it be?
Curry talked about the importance of the First Amendment in the Civil Rights Movement and women's suffrage, and we actually have a question about the First Amendment from Lauren Johnson of Riverview School in Big Rapids, Michigan. Lauren wants to know, what is your position regarding freedom of speech for elementary students? She goes on to say, let's say with t-shirts that may say things that could be regarded as offensive.
Okay, well, this is not my position. There's been a whole line of Supreme Court cases decided in the area of school speech. And I guess the bottom line is that speech that is going to cause substantial disruption or that the court may find is totally inappropriate in the school environment and dangerous to the school environment, that can be prohibited. But the case law has said that the students' rights to free speech don't end at the schoolyard gate. So there is a recognition that children do have a right to free speech, but it is subject to limitation. And I think in elementary school, it's probably more limited than in high school because of the key role that the teachers in the school plays in the formation of children at an early age. But there are limits, but free speech does exist in the school context.
So Lauren mentioned words that may be offensive. Who determines whether something is offensive as it pertains to the First Amendment?
Well, that's an interesting question, and that is the issue. Is it up to the school to decide that, or is it up to the court? And more often than not, we find that we are judging what goes on in the school and whether something is offensive. And sometimes when I'm speaking to groups, I question whether judges are the right people to be doing that, whether we should entrust a little bit more to the school officials, especially given all the challenges they have in this day and age with children acting out and the bullying that could go on. But it's an issue, but it's an issue that ultimately does have to be decided by the court.
All right, so we're ready to continue our tour. So let's go to Signers Hall, and this is one of the most popular exhibits at the National Constitution Center.
Welcome to Signers Hall. When you walk into this room, you'll see statues of men that were there during the signing of the Constitution on September 17, 1787. We worked with historians and artists to build statues of each of the men that were in the room. They wanted them to be as real as possible. And so they looked at their paintings, they looked at information about their suits, and if they had clothing from the real people, they remade it. And they put them with other people they would have been talking to. So you really walk into the moment. The cool part is, at first they thought people were going to walk in and feel reverence. What happened next is kids came in, and they ran around, and they touched people. But it turned from a room of quiet memory into a loud, active room with all different age groups. And it's really fun, and a great room to remember the past. Here are some of the great guys in the room, and I'm going to point out some of my favorites. So Ben Franklin is right here right now. He's 81 at the time, so he's the oldest delegate to the convention. But he's the most well-known, not just in America, but globally. But because Ben Franklin couldn't stand up and give his normal speeches that he had done at a younger age, he would whisper ideas to Gouverneur Morris, and Gouverneur Morris would share them with him. Gouverneur Morris is fabulous. He is the guy that was in charge of penning the Constitution, the prose and the words of the Constitution. So when we think of the beautiful introduction of We the People, it was his team that was in charge of picking the words and really making sure that the words flowed even though it was a legal document. Now, there's some really funny stories, and a lot of people know the great funny stories about Ben Franklin, and you can tell that they know him because when they walk into the room, they give him a lot of love. And what you can tell with these bronze statues is how often he's rubbed. His head is getting shinier and shinier. Gouverneur Morris is probably probably everybody else's favorite because he's rocking this awesome peg leg here, which he actually lost in a carriage accident. Hashtag 18th century problems. Okay, so this is a great spot to stand in the room because you actually get to stand between two giants, metaphorically speaking, James. First, we have Madison, who we consider the father of the Constitution. This is a brilliant man. This is the man that wrote the ideas of the Constitution, brought them all together, and the reason why we have the Bill of Rights today. Now, on the other side, a lot of people call him the father of our country. We have George Washington. He was the president of the convention. Our country was in turmoil, and we needed the great minds to come together. But it wasn't until they found out that George Washington was coming that everybody decided that they will go to. Now, you'll notice that George is actually not that shiny. And this always makes me laugh, because something about George Washington, the person, was he didn't really shake hands. He wasn't kind of the chummy guy that you would think of. He wasn't somebody you'd walk over and throw your arm around. And I noticed that the way people walk around him is the same thing. They'll get really excited, they're all George Washington, and they walk up to him and they stand really calmly beside him like this. The best part of these statues is you can actually feel the person behind the statue. Think about it for a minute. Take a look at this guy. This is Alexander Hamilton. Take a look at him. Look up and down. What's the first thought that comes to your head? You can share it with your friend. You can tell other people around the room. He looks like he's kind of arrogant. And you know what? That's pretty close to what Hamilton really was. But Hamilton was very brilliant in some of his ideas. He had ideas about banking that were far beyond any of his peers. And you can see that in his arrogance and the way he holds himself. There's probably a few names that you're expecting me to say but you haven't heard yet. Like, where's Jefferson? Where's Adams? Well, they're not here at the Constitutional Convention, and they did not sign the Constitution. Jefferson was in France at the time, and Adams was in England. They were off doing other work for America at that time. So they were really involved, but through letters and through ideas. I'm standing in the middle of the three men we like to refer to as the dissenters. So you've got Jerry, Randolph, and Mason. And we call them dissenters for a really important reason. They were coming from the ideas that the Constitution was not right yet. And so they did not sign the Constitution. They dissented. And that's something that we do a lot as Americans. We don't walk away and say, no, that's not good, I'm leaving. We stay and we protest. So the reason they stayed in protest is because we did not have a Bill of Rights. And they were afraid that the Constitution spelled out what the federal government could do, but did not protect the individual. So they may look angry, but they're angry because they're standing up for our individual rights, and that's a good thing here at the Constitution Center.
Definitely a fun exhibit here at the National Constitution Center. We have a question that takes us from 1787 to today. This is from Lindsay Kraft from Mount Hebron High School in Ellicott City, Maryland. She says, it was a male-dominated world 200 years ago, but even today there are still so many more male federal judges than female. Why do you think that is?
Well, one of the reasons is because we have life tenure. We have a lot of male judges in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s who were in law school classes where there maybe was one woman or two women. When I went to law school, I started out, there were 13 women in my first year class. By the time I was third year, there were 30 women, and it was increasing. So I think as time goes on, you'll see more women judges, and the numbers will shift in terms of the percentage. I do know that President Obama in his first term nominated, I believe, over 50% of his nominees were women. So it is changing. The pool of women is increasing, whereas when I became a judge, the pool of women who had been in practice for 20 years and were qualified wasn't that large. So it's changing. Just be patient.
Well, you did mention life tenure, and actually we did have a question from a student who asked that very question, and that was, this was from Alicia Bradshaw from Roosevelt Elementary in Boise, Idaho, who wanted to know, do you think judges should have term limits? Why or why not?
Well, from self-interest, I say definitely not. I'm here for the duration. I don't think it's a good idea. I think the judges we have who have been on the bench a long time have a wealth of experience. And they know how to decide cases. They're up on the law. They really do a great job. One of my colleagues on the Third Circuit filed his last opinion the day he died at age 96. And he was with it, to the end. I think it would be a shame. I think we'd be losing a lot of wisdom and experience if we were to term limit federal judges.
This is from Mrs. Alicia's class, Lorraine City School in Garfield, Ohio. They want to know, do you find it hard to make decisions for the country?
Well, when you put it that way, I should say yes. It is a weighty responsibility to be deciding some of these cases. I mean, you'll have your garden variety case that really is not that difficult, but very often you'll have a plaintiff who has been, who believes she's been discriminated against in the workplace. You'll have someone who is filing a habeas petition having been in jail for 18 years, and you have a real question about their guilt or innocence. And you do take the responsibility very seriously. I don't have difficulty making decisions because I can read the law, understand it. I usually can figure out which side I'm on, but I definitely think twice, 3 times, 4 times in these weighty moments. I will sleep on things. I will take time, and you'll find that our judges sometimes people don't like the delay in deciding our cases. But we decide our cases with a very serious understanding of what we're doing, and the time we take is to make sure we're getting it right.
And you're not issuing individual decisions, right, at the appellate level?
Correct. We sit in panels of 3, and we decide cases in panels of 3, and there can be 2 against 1, with 2 people in the majority and 1 person writing a dissenting opinion. And some of those cases can go to the Supreme Court, but they're always, it amazes me how thoughtful our judges are and how seriously they take their responsibility.
Well, let's go back to Curry one last time to see another exhibit.
We're looking at constitutional rights, arguments, and travels. So this is an interactive exhibit within our Bill of Rights space, but it's also online. And what it does is it looks really closely at the Bill of Rights and where the ideas came from in our country. So let's take a closer look. We've got a giant timeline here, and it starts at around 1774, and then it goes all the way to 1791 when the Bill of Rights was ratified. And at the bottom, we can go through each different amendment really closely. So let's take a closer look at that 8th Amendment. This is cruel and unusual punishment. You can see where all the ideas were talked about in these states and written down. Virginia Declaration of Rights. 99% of that language is exactly the same as what winds up in the 8th Amendment when it's ratified in 1791. That's where that idea came from. And then this second part, Rights Around the World, really lets you look at the Bill of Rights and where they've spread across the world and where other countries have similar rights to us. So take a look at due process. When you look at that and you touch that, the yellow is where there are due process laws around the globe. That's kind of scary in a way, that you can look at our country and say, this is something that we see as Americans as essential to who we are, that you are guaranteed due process under the law. But there's a lot of other countries that don't spell that out. The other thing that I find really interesting is when you look at other ideas and you look at equality before the law, that all people are treated equally before the law. Now that gets yellow across the board. There are many, many countries that have this written into their constitution, but what is the difference here between what is written down and what is enforced? And what you really need to pay attention to is the news and see what's going on in different countries. Because just because a country writes it down, it doesn't mean it is actually held accountable to that. Almost 9% of Russians' equality before the law is the same as ours, but it doesn't mean that it's enforced. And so it's a really interesting way you have to look at laws that are written and laws that are enforced.
That's a great exhibit and gives us a great global perspective about rights and the rule of law. And Mr. Rameda's class at MOA, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, middle school in Panama City, Florida, wants to know if you can explain how the rule of law relates to the Constitution. And I guess just to add on to that, how we regard the rule of law here and the difference between the rule of how we understand and understand the rule of law in the United States compared to other countries.
Well, the Constitution is a key part of the rule of law. It contains a lot of our government principles. And the rule of law really is a principle that our nation should be ruled by law rather than by the arbitrary decisions of individuals or groups. We really believe that the law is the backbone of our country. And I think I'm not an expert in global affairs, but from what I can perceive, we really enforce our law, and we live by our law. As we live and breathe, it's almost like the air that we breathe. We're a very law-abiding country. Sandra Day O'Connor talks about the fact that people think law is in the courts, but when you think about it, 95% of the law is just what we do every day. We don't litter, we obey traffic rules, we file tax returns by and large. We're basically a non-corrupt, law-abiding country. In other places, they have constitutions and they have laws, but I don't think they have the teeth that we have in our laws. I mean, we have the exclusionary rule, which means that if evidence is obtained illegally in an unreasonable search, that's suppressed. It can't come into trial. In some countries, that's unheard of. The fact that you keep evidence out that might prove someone's guilt because it was obtained. And that country may have the Fourth Amendment, but it doesn't have the teeth and the meaning. We have the respect for the law and the belief that our courts will do the right thing. And I think it's the predictability, the consistency of our law that really sets us apart from other countries.
Some students want to know about the difficult decisions that you've had to render. And is there one that you think was like the most difficult decision that you ever had to render, or the most difficult case that you ever heard?
Well, there was one case where it was a very old case. It was a very old criminal conviction, and it had gone through the state courts, and had gone through federal habeas, and we were probably the court of last resort for this man who had been in jail for 17 years. And I actually believed he was innocent. There was prosecutorial misconduct. There were a number of things that went wrong in the trial, and yet it was difficult. Every other court had said that he should be in jail, that everything went fine with his trial. And as a federal judge, you are about to grant habeas, which means the person gets out of jail. For all you know, that person could be a serial rapist, commits a rape next week. Someone is harmed by what you've done. There's outcry, and yet, if that person is innocent, and we did grant habeas in this one case, and he was never retried. And I do believe that he was innocent, but you have, again, the weight of responsibility of, are you letting an innocent person out, or are you letting a person out who is going to then wreak havoc on the streets? And you really don't know.
Very serious kinds of cases. So I know that civics and civic engagement is something near and dear to your heart. And we have this question from John and Diana from Harlan School in Wilmette, Illinois. How would you get high school students more involved and interested in the Constitution?
Well, we do have the Rendell Center for Civics and Civic Engagement at the Annenberg Public Policy Center. And our focus, though, is on elementary students, 4th and 5th graders, teaching them about democracy and about the Constitution. And that's the way I would get high school students engaged, is by getting them engaged when they're in their 4th and 5th grade. We have what we call a citizenship challenge, and 4th and 5th graders submit an essay on a certain issue. Last year it was about voting. We got these great submissions by these young people about what to do to increase voting. They're youngsters, they're 4th graders. They said, replace graffiti with murals about voting. Put voting information on cereal boxes. Kids really can think things through, and sometimes they have the brightest ideas. They're not jaded like we can be even in middle school and high school. So what we're doing is focusing on elementary education and teaching our children young. When they learn about their faith, they learn their manners, they learn their community, and I think it won't leave them. I think they will be engaged if we get them when they're early.
Absolutely, and there are all kinds of events for high school students and middle school students to get involved in.
Right.
Judge Rendell, thank you so much for being with us and giving students a better understanding of your role in the Constitution and the importance of being involved. And thanks to our partners, the American Bar Association, Division for Public Education, and of course our host, the National Constitution Center. By the way, today the National Constitution Center launched an all-new interactive Constitution where you can explore the most current debates about the Constitution with a wide range of legal scholars. You can check it out by going to their website at constitutioncenter.org. And of course, if you're near Philadelphia, please visit the museum. You can also see